The idea really started back in high school. I was researching a paper. I think I was in the ninth grade. I was in the library. I was bored. Went into the stacks and came out with The Hound of the Baskervilles. And I stayed up all night reading it. I didn't finish it until 2 o'clock in the morning.
We see him over the 60 stories in many different lights, and I think that that's what part of his appeal is. There's a lot of, the 19th century man about him, but also something that transcends the particular period in which the stories take place.
Dracula is something that has been, I couldn't really give you a number, but actually I have a book in there that probably could. The number of films that have been made.
What I did, in essence, was to take the characters and events from Bram Stoker's Dracula and move them into the universe of Sherlock Holmes. The challenge here was, of course, to be faithful to Sir Arthur Conan Doyle and to Bram Stoker. In other words, not disturb the source material, yet still come up with a wholly original story.
Epistolary novels weren't new when Stoker's writing it. I mean, one of the first sort of novels written in Ireland, which Stoker is Irish, was an epistolary novel, The Wild Irish Girl. But what Stoker does with it is very interesting because it's such a multiplicity of voices, and because it's a lot of different perspectives that are sometimes conflicting and sometimes are sometimes actually secretive in some ways. They sometimes conceal things.
I think it really is important to recognize that part of that humanity that I was talking about with Sherlock Holmes has to do with his relationship with Dr. Watson. And so I think that when a pastiche is written, the writer has to be as careful about Watson as he is about Holmes and about that relationship. Because again, part of what draws us in to the stories is the quality of that friendship.
Well, the first decision I had to make was which universe to use. I could, if I were going to use the Dracula universe, it would have to be a supernatural story, and it's much harder to fit Sherlock Holmes in that because Holmes is so rational. So, the first decision, the Conan Doyle universe. To bring Dracula into that universe, you therefore had to get the timeline down from Dracula, which luckily is done quite neatly. Every single chapter in Dracula has a date on it.
Well, we don't have a sort of coherent kind of narrative in the way that we have about something like Frankenstein that Mary Shelley puts together, where she says that I had a dream about this, and this idea came to me in a dream. Rather, what we have from Stoker is a long period of research. He began researching in 1890, and the novel was published in 1897.
So you know where Dracula's going to be on any given day. And then you do the same thing with Sherlock Holmes. I mean, fortunately, a scholar by the name of William Baring-Gould went ahead and did that. So I had laid that chronology over the Dracula chronology, so you know where Sherlock Holmes and Dracula are at any given time.
One of the things I liked about The Plague of Dracula is that from the first page on, you know that it's a well-written story, it engages you, you're going to keep going with all of its premises. You have to say, it's taking me into new territory, but it's taking me into that new territory without compromising the nature of Sherlock Holmes or the nature of Dr. Watson. And that's very important in a pastiche.
The response to Sherlock Holmes and the Plague of Dracula was very gratifying. The reviews have been mostly good, all but one or two. And I intend to keep going. There are 2 more Sherlock Holmes books I want to write. One of them fills in Holmes's childhood. We have not had a Holmes Begins story, I don't think, except for The Adventure of the Gloria Scott. And the other book I would like to write would be to tell the fuller story of Charles Augustus Milverton, known as the Master Blackmailer. That's one of the more interesting stories in the Conan Doyle canon, and raised a lot of fascinating questions. At one point in that story, for instance, Holmes impersonates a plumber and actually gets himself engaged to get into Milverton's house. That's so completely out of character for him. We have to wonder why. So, I think it would take a full novel to explain that, and when I get the time to research it, I will write it.